Section 4 of 3 SF Short Stories by Paul W. Fairman. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Secrets of the Martians, Part 1. Gordon Malloy, Chief of Interplanetary Security, rocked back in his chair, and with seeming unconcern looked Rex Tate over searchingly. "How is Pluto?" "Stinking. Why we want that frozen lump in the Federation is something I can't figure." "Rich in minerals." "You left me there for 7 Terran months." Rex allowed criticism to sound in his voice. This did not bother Malloy. "Good for you. Toughened you up. Safe, too. Never much trouble on Pluto." "That's why I joined up, so I'd be nice and safe." "I've got something in mind for you." "Where?" "Mars, but it could be nasty, so you better go back to Pluto." "Try and get me on a ship. What's with Mars?" Malloy looked for a place to put his feet and found only the top of his desk. Up there they looked like a pair of crossed banjo cases. "I wish I knew." "I'll go find out for you." Malloy's eyes brooded. The thing started as a result of privileges and stupidity, the way most things of this sort do. As you know, Mars is the only planet in the Federation without representation, because the Martians refuse to represent themselves. They want no part of the Alliance. Malloy glanced up quickly. "How's your knowledge of the Martian background?" "Sketchy. Ask me about Venus, Mercury, Neptune, Pluto. By all means, ask me about Pluto." "We're talking about Mars. When we went up there in 2091, we found as close to a dead planet as you could want. There were people, but damned funny ones. They wouldn't fight us or they wouldn't join us. They had a kind of pride we've never been able to analyze. They just kept backing away. We found rich minerals and fine farmland, land that had lain fallow for ages just waiting for the plow, and plenty of water. Every spring the ice cliffs at the poles melted on schedule and sent down the moisture for bumper crops. But the Martians didn't farm. They didn't mine. They didn't do anything so far as we could discover except back away into their caves and rocky fastness up north and give us the cold eye." Rex knew all this, but he liked to hear the chief talk, liked to be with him as did every other agent in the gang. So he registered bright interest and listened. "They rebuffed our advances and so we let them alone." "But that happened on the other planets too," Rex said innocently. "And so we went right in and got acquainted. Looked in their bedrooms and their dresser drawers." Malloy frowned slightly. "But on Mars, we didn't." "Nope. I wonder if it could have been because we had their land and their mines and didn't think they had anything of value around their North Pole." "You're speaking disrespectfully of the system," Malloy said in mild disapproval. "You sound as though you think we moved in and took planets over. All we did was develop latent resources." "Make for the better life." "Invite them to join us for a greater system." "The same way the British and the Dutch and the French and the Russians did in ancient times here on Terra." Malloy regarded his big feet with hostility, as though they and not Rex Tate had been speaking. "Do you want this assignment or don't you?" "Sure, I want it," Rex grinned. What other department chief would let a subordinate sound off? None, except Malloy. That was one of the things that made up for the low pay. "All right, then shut your trap and listen. As I said, the Martians backed off into those hills and caves and hung out a private sign that we respected for 300 years. Then, about 6 months ago, a martologist named Spencer got tired of testing flora and fauna in the safe areas and wangled a permit to penetrate the taboo areas around the pole." Rex Tate straightened, honestly amazed. "Alone?" "No, in the company of his 20-year-old daughter." "Good God! Why, we wouldn't even send a nuclear battalion in there. Who issued such an insane permit?" "That's not our business. The criminally stupid ass is being hunted from other directions, but in this age of red tape and buck passing, I doubt he'll ever be found. Our job lies elsewhere. We've got to find out what happened to Spencer's daughter." "What about Spencer?" "He came back." "Without his daughter?" "Yes." "I'd like to talk to the slob for a few minutes." Malloy dropped his feet to the floor. "Come on, I'll give you a chance." Rex followed Malloy out of the office. They got on an elevator that dropped them to a sub-basement. Malloy manned a scooter and they rode for several minutes down a long, straight corridor. Just when Rex wondered whether or not the chief knew where he was going, Malloy stopped the scooter in front of a closed door. He opened the door and motioned Rex inside. The room was small and bare, boasting as furniture only a rectangular table in its center. On the table sat a rectangular box. Malloy pointed into the box and said, "All right, start talking." A small chill danced down Rex's spine. In the box lay a serene-faced, middle-aged man with his hands folded over his chest. He had a rosy complexion and appeared to be napping. What an odd place for a man to sleep, Rex thought. He glanced up at Malloy. The latter said, "As near as we can tell, he's been dead for 4 months." "But—" "I know. Perfectly preserved. The skin soft. All normal fluid still present in the body. Nothing's wrong with him except that he's dead." Rex touched the soft tissue. It was cool. "How can you figure the time?" "He came in on a food freighter, in a cargo of potatoes that was sent from a farmer's market at a place called New Iowa in the heart of the Martian farm belt." "Not far from the forbidden polar circle," Rex said. "I thought you didn't know anything about Mars." "Well, things were dull on Pluto. I studied timetables." "That's interesting. I'll issue them to all agents." "Of course you've got no proof that the body was put aboard at Iowa." "Yes, we have. The hold was locked and sealed there. The body was inside. The seal was unbroken." The closed eyes of Professor Spencer made Rex almost as uncomfortable as the closed lips. "All right, I've got the picture. What do we do? Send in a battalion to question the Martian taste in gift packages?" "We've got no proof the Martians did this." "Who else?" "Maybe some transplanted Terran farmer took up taxidermy on the side." "The odds are way against it." "So are the odds against a solar eclipse, but they happen." "Then we make no hostile gestures?" "Not until we know the score." "That's what I want you to do, Rex. Go out to Mars and find the score." "Okay, Chief." Rex took a last look at the body. "And if I come back in that shape, check my pockets. There might be time to write a note." "Don't be such a pessimist," Malloy growled. From the diary of Tommy Wilkes. "The first thing you miss on Mars is the green. The things hardest to get used to are the reds and the yellows and the tired browns. Never is there any bright, rich green filled with the promise of spring, as I grew used to in Kentucky back on Terra. Because this is a dying planet, and even when the Martian spring does come, there's a feeling of tiredness in the air. And the warm rain on your face, you miss that too because there is no rain on Mars. You keep looking at the sky, hunting for the big black thunderheads that sent people running for cover back in Kentucky. You look and look until your eyes ache, and even the sting of icy cold rain would be nice. The water here is all underground and in the canals. It is good water, running down through the bogs and the rivers and the marshes in spring when the big northern ice cliffs melt. It is very funny about the ice cliffs. Up there it snows in the winter, I guess because they get higher and higher until they are like mountains. Then in spring they melt in a few days. Nobody knows much about the ice mountains because they're in the middle of the forbidden polar zone. It is said there are Martian people up in the forbidden circle, but I don't think so. Because why would anybody live in such a place when the level lands and the old sea bottoms and the canals are down here? Anyhow, we never go there. The only Martians I ever saw are the ones that come by like tramps asking for food. We always give it to them because they are always hungry and we don't want any trouble. And then there is Barzoo. He was here when we came. He lives in a little stone house out beyond the potato fields. All Martians have hard brown skins, almost like shells, and instead of white in their eyes, like Terrans, they have light green, and the pupils are always jet black. Looking at a Martian is a little hard to get used to at first, but after a while it's all right. Mom and Dad made me stay away from Barzoo at first, but he was harmless and now they let me visit him. We talk, but I can only understand a little of what he says, and he can't understand much Terran. He is a funny man, Barzoo. He never smiles and gives you the idea he has only contempt for Terrans. But he takes me and shows me where the big gadfish hide in holes in the canals, and how to catch them with a white pebble on the end of a line. Nobody minds Barzoo. I am Thomas Wilkes, Jr., but everybody calls me Tommy. I am 15 years old and I like to write, and someday I will go to Terra to some big university and learn to do it well, and then I'll write short stories all about Mars for the Terrans to read. My father is Thomas Wilkes, Sr. My mother is Lucy Wilkes. My sister is Jean Wilkes. Father brought us to Mars when the Federation opened this land. It is very easy to grow crops here. Very big potatoes, because Dad said ages ago it was farmed by the Martians and the fields and the canals are all here. We put the potatoes on big space freighters that take them back to Terra. All the farmers send their potatoes in the big freighters, and they all talk about going back themselves after they get rich out here, but I have a feeling very few of them will go. There is something about this planet that grows on you. It's awfully cold a lot of the time, and you have to learn to walk carefully, or you go right up in the air. But you get used to it, and 2 moons instead of 1. I like keeping a diary because someday I will need what I'm writing now for my stories about Mars, and will become very famous and live in a high tower in Kentucky. Or maybe I will build a tower right here on Mars. Wednesday. We have a new man working for us. He came in on the last freighter. He is very tall and has yellow hair, and is different from most men that come here to work. Most of them go to the saloon when the ship sets down, but this one went to the candy store, and that's where I met him. He bought me some ice cream, and we talked about Mars. I guess I did most of the talking. I told him all about the farm, and about Barzoo, and the gadfish you catch with a pebble. He seemed very interested in Barzoo, and said he'd like to meet him. I told him if he worked for Dad I would introduce him to Barzoo, and he said all right. Which Dad slapped me on the back for later because help is hard to get, and he gave me credit for talking the yellow-haired man into working for us. His name is Rex Tate, and we didn't ask him how he happened to come out here. We're just glad that he did, because help is a problem. After this, I guess the farmers will check the candy store too when they come into Iowa along with the saloon. But who would expect to find a grown man like Rex Tate in a candy store? He's different than the other workers who come here. A lot more intelligent. I like to talk to him. Rex Tate, clad in a Martian fox jacket against the sharp winter air, worked at a strand of broken fence on the far north line of the Wilkes farm. He straightened and looked off across the dull brown plains. The experts said this had all been ocean once, back in the days when Terra was a seething, untenanted ball of hot lava. Rex wondered how right they were. One thing was sure. A no more dull, drab, peaceful landscape could possibly be imagined. He turned to look northward toward the high ice cliffs of the polar circle. The thin air made distances deceptive, and the cliffs looked to be hanging almost over Rex's head, but he knew they were many miles away. He frowned. This had seemed the logical place to start his investigation. Yet what evil could lurk among these simple, energetic Terrans? Such an act as had been perpetrated upon Professor Spencer was certainly beyond their ability to conceive, and Margot Spencer was certainly not hidden among them. Only one thing kept him in this vicinity, and it was indeed a fail thread. The Martian hermit young Wilkes had told him about. He wanted to look the man over, but had delayed, feeling that even though the lead seemed hardly to be taken seriously, caution was still the better part of wisdom. Rex turned now to watch big Tom Wilkes stride across the frozen brown moss of the pasture. Terran cattle, Rex had learned, thrived on the prickly stuff. Tom Wilkes had a big, cordial face, roughened and seamed by the Martian cold. He slapped Rex on the shoulder and said, "Well, how do you like this outpost of civilization?" "It's different, I'll say that." "Hope you grow to like it. A man can get rich out here." "I don't doubt it." "You aren't like the others," Wilkes said. "Thank you." "I mean, most of the help we get out here are drifters looking for a stake. You could easily get yourself some land and make a go of it. We need good solid men out here. Now I've got a fine-looking daughter." Wilkes paused. "Guess maybe I'm going too fast." "Jean's a fine girl, but you don't know much about me, Mr. Wilkes." "The name's Tom, and don't forget it. And don't think I'm going to nose into your business until you're ready to tell us. We're inclined to take people at face value. We consider 'em first-rate until they prove otherwise. You might say we kind of follow our instincts." Rex gave him a quick smile. "One thing puzzles me." "What's that?" "How come there are no Martians working for you? The pay is good. I'd think they'd be swarming around." "You don't know much about Mars, son. I've got a hunch there aren't many Martians." When Rex started to reply, Tom Wilkes waved a hand. "Oh, I know the Federation experts tell us different. Say they live up here under the ice cap. But I don't believe it. A few of them would wander down." "Young Tommy tells me you've got one around. A character named Barzoo." "Uh-huh. God knows where he came from or what he wants here. Doesn't care to work a lick." This, Rex realized, was Tom Wilkes' basis of judging a man. A worker rated high with him. A fairly presentable worker rated high enough to be considered for his daughter's hand. Not a bad way to look at it at that, Rex thought. "I'd like to meet this Barzoo." "Tommy'll take you out there any time you say." "He goes alone?" "The old coot's harmless. Looked him over myself. He takes the youngster fishing." "Characters like that interest me." "Well, finish this fence now and get back to the house. Jean's fixed up something a little special for supper. Got her hair and face all shined up, too. I wonder why." Wilkes winked and strode off about his business, leaving Rex to wonder about Jean. He'd have to be a little careful there. She was a nice kid. There'd be no problem, though, because he wouldn't be around long enough. He hooked the last strand of wire into place and headed for the house. Jean Wilkes was a lithe, slim, dark-haired girl with laughing blue eyes and red, almost sensuous lips. When Rex got to the house, she was there to open the door. She wore a close-fitting blouse, slacks, and a frilly postage-stamp apron. There was welcome in her smile, and her eyes spoke quite frankly. They said, "I'm after you." "Come on in and chuck your coat," Jean said. "I'll bet you're frozen." "Only my fingers." Jean took his hand in hers and rubbed briskly. Her eyes teased. "I thought you were too hot-blooded to let a little cold snap chill you." "I'm used to a hot sun." She could change mood quickly. Her smile slipped away. "Where did you come from, Rex?" As he hesitated, she put a quick finger over his lips. "Don't tell me. Sorry I pried. We aren't that way here on Mars, really." She moved away from him. "How do you like my apron? It's supposed to show you how domestic I am." "You did the cooking tonight?" "Uh-huh. Mom and Dad and Tommy just left. They went to New Iowa for dinner with some friends. I'm in charge of the feed bag." "Swell. Let's open it up." Supper over, Rex helped Gene with the dishes. He was struck by the domestic situation into which this case had brought him. He felt guilty, as though he were trespassing on the hospitality of these fine people. And fine people they were, of that he was assured. Now only remained to discover by what weird turn of circumstances the perfectly preserved body of Professor Spencer had been placed in a sealed potato hold in New Iowa. "The ships that go out of here," Rex said, "do they all set down in New Iowa? On the field there?" They were having coffee in the living room. Jean had removed her apron and sat close to Rex on the lounge. Her hair was soft and gleaming in the light of the open flame from the old-fashioned fireplace. "Usually," she said, "except during harvest time. Then they put down wherever they can. We've had them parked in our lower pasture. You see, we like to get the crops away as quick as we can, and the freight company always sends enough ships to accommodate us because the run is so profitable." "The lower pasture? Isn't that where this Barzoo fellow hangs out?" Jean shuddered. "He's awful. I suppose I shouldn't feel this way about him, because he's harmless and very good to Tommy. But that dull brown hide, his funny eyes. I'd like to see what he looks like. I'll have to ask Tommy to take me down there." Jean regarded him thoughtfully. "I'll take you down." "But why should you?" She shrugged. "I don't seem to be doing very well by firelight. We have 2 moons up here. They should be twice as hard to resist as one." Rex was playing it straight all the way through, which meant playing it dumb. "But it's very cold out." "Pretty cold in here, too. Let's get started." Rex put on his jacket, wondering what he was going to do with this girl. She appeared from her bedroom wearing a white parka that made her look doubly attractive. "It's only a 10-minute walk, and the cold isn't as penetrating here as on Terra." They hiked along, hand in hand, under the 2 racing Martian moons. The air was sharp, stinging, like heady wine. Rex felt as though he could have jumped clear up to where Terra hung close and beautiful in the night sky. This, he decided, was a wonderful planet, a wonderful country, a great place to settle down and build something, raise children. Bodies in shipping cases seemed far away and unreal. Jean's hand, warm in his own, squeezed suddenly as though she sensed his thoughts. She glanced at him, her eyes rich with meaning. Then she broke away and ran on ahead toward an oddly shaped monolith of a hut further down the pasture. As Rex hurried forward, he studied the stone hutch. It was obviously very old, something left over from a lost and forgotten civilization. It impressed him as having been built as both a shelter and a symbol. There appeared to be undecipherable meaning in the formation of it, blurred now by the wear of centuries. Jean stopped beside the narrow entrance. "He's not here," she said. Rex pushed his head inside, bent forward to peer about the small interior. It was smooth, unadorned, cone-shaped. He took a step forward, heard a quick laugh, and tripped over Jean's extended foot. He grabbed as he went down, inside the shelter, and caught Jean's arm. He dragged her with him, and they went down in a heap. He was looking into her fur-framed face, into her eyes. She had stopped laughing. Neither of them spoke during several quick breaths. Then Jean said, "I guess you think I'm pretty forward, don't you?" "I think you're pretty wonderful." "I think maybe we're different up here, a lot different than we'd be on Terra." Her breath was warm in Rex's face. "How do you figure that?" "We're more elemental out here, I guess. We're more afraid of letting life get past us. I want you so bad it hurts. I want to marry you and have your children, and I'm afraid of not letting you know it." Her mouth was on his. Her body, through the soft fur of their clothing, was warm and rounded against him. His blood was pounding, and he was conscious of 2 things. First, this intoxicating girl in his arms. Second, The fact that the slab against which he was pressed had loosened and turned, that it had moved on a hinge of some kind, and he had to hold tight to Jean to keep from falling through. Then he became aware of a third presence. Just outside a figure loomed, a hideous-looking man with a brown-scarred hide. A man with eyes that seemed to hold all the hate in the universe. From the diary of Tommy Wilkes. Saturday. They're gone, Jean and Rex Tate. Nobody around here knows what to think because there's no place to go. No ships have come in or gone out. Everybody is talking about it. Some people say Rex had a ship and that he put Jean in it and took her away. But how can that be true? Where could anyone hide a ship around here? The country is flat as far as you can see. They say he must have had a ship hidden up in the ice country, in the Forbidden Circle, and he took her up there. But that's crazy too. They were having supper here last night when Mom and Dad and I went to the Parkers for supper. They weren't here when we got back, and none of the cars or horses are gone, so how could they have got away? They say he took Jean away, but I wonder if it wasn't the other way around. Jean was in love with him. She wanted to marry him, and I wonder if maybe she didn't take him away. But that's foolish too. There was no place for her to take him or him to take her. It certainly is a mystery. We haven't had so much excitement since we came to Mars. People coming and going, men riding off in bunches hunting under every piece of moss as though they turned to midgets and were hiding there. It's all very silly. But Mom is sick about it. She's in bed and Mrs. Parker is taking care of her. The men swear they'll catch Rex and kill him wherever they find him. They say he dragged Jean away to have her for himself. I don't think so, not for that reason anyhow. I know how Jean felt about him, and girls in love are funny. He wouldn't have had to drag her anywhere. That was how Jean felt about him. It's all very strange, and very lonesome here with Dad gone off with the hunting party and Mom under sedatives. I'm going to ask Barzoo what he thinks about it. Sunday. I've learned something important and I don't know what to do about it. I went to Barzoo's hutch to find him, but he was not there. I waited around a while, and then, while I was looking inside, I thought I saw something funny about the wall. One section of it looked different than the others. It wasn't dirty along the bottom. It looked as though there was a crack there. I examined it and found it moved on a hinge. I pushed it back and everything was dark behind it. I listened for a while and then thought I heard a sound inside, as though somebody had taken a step. I got scared and dropped the stone back into place and began to run. I ran all the way home to tell Dad about it, because that must be where Rex and Jean went. There can't be any other place. But Dad isn't here, and I can't tell Mom. She's too sick, and I'd only disturb her. It's been an hour now. Dad still isn't home. I've done some thinking. Why did I run away from the hutch? There isn't anything there to be afraid of. When you think it over, it's logical that Barzoo would have a place underneath the hutch to keep warm on cold winter nights. Even if his hide is thick, he still needs shelter. And why should he have told me about it? It's his private business, and I never asked him. I'll bet he would have told me if I'd asked him. I'm going to wait another half hour for Dad. Then, if he isn't back, I'll go to the hutch with a flashlight and see what's under it. Maybe everybody's right about Rex. Maybe he's got Jean down there. But if he has, I'll bet she isn't trying very hard to get away. The half hour's up. Here I go. That's the story, Rex said. Now you know who I am and how I happened to come to New Iowa. Jean twisted her arms against the thongs that bound her wrists and said, I think you were stupid not to tell us and let us try to help you. But I was moving in the dark, entirely unsure of myself. I had to look around and find out. Oh, I see. You suspected us. You thought we were capable of murdering a man and putting his body in a box and shipping it back to Terra with our potatoes. I thought no such thing." They spoke openly, convinced that the 5 Martians who were their captors could not understand Terran. They had been at the hutch when Rex and Jean got there, 4 of them, crouched behind the wall. When Barzoo arrived, just as Rex tilted the section of the wall, they had seized the 2 Terrans and tied their hands. There had been nothing Rex could do, hampered as he was by Jean lying in his arms. Rex's thoughts had been the bitterest of gall as he forecast his report to the chief. That was, if he lived long enough to submit a report. I was necking with a local farmer's daughter in the stone hutch of a Martian character. I had every reason to be suspicious of this Martian and should have been on my toes when he arrived. Instead, I was on my back, kissing this aforementioned local daughter, and this Martian and 4 of his friends took us both. No credit to them, though. In the shape we were in, a crippled blind man could have taken us. Any further orders, Chief? The Martians had ignored his pleas that they leave Jean behind, or perhaps the Martians did not even understand him. They had been led off down a long, dark tunnel. So far as Rex and Jean were concerned, their next step could have almost dropped them off into oblivion, but the Martians were sure-footed and seemed to be entirely familiar with the pitch-black tunnel. They walked for what seemed hours before a light showed in the distance. Another hour brought them to the spot where a dusty overhead bulb glowed dimly. It appeared to have been there untouched for centuries, because the ceiling was damp and calcium-bearing droplets had almost covered it. Yet it glowed bravely. Here, the 2 Terrans were allowed to rest. One of the Martians dug into a small opening in one wall and brought forth a quantity of grayish substance, which he offered them, holding it toward their mouths with his filthy hand. They turned their faces away, and he made no further effort to feed them. They were ignored, left sitting on a ledge while the Martians gorged down the food. Afterward, the one Jean designated as Barzoo looked up suddenly as though a thought had come. He talked to one who had finished eating and was wiping his hands on his dull brown hide. Rex tried to fathom Barzoo's words. Familiar with the languages and dialects the system over, he got some of Barzoo's meaning. The Martian leader was worried about the condition in which the hutch floor had been left. Perhaps the wall section had been left tilted. After a while, the other Martian got to his feet and trotted back through the darkness along the tunnel through which they had come. After the Martian left, Barzoo wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and motioned Rex and Jean to get up and move into a passage to the right. "How much further can he take us?" Jean asked. "After the first drop back at the hutch, it seems to me the tunnel has been level." "A floor can be deceptive. We could have been moving down a gradual slope for miles." Jean said nothing. The going was easier now, this tunnel being lighted at intervals by the strange overhead bulbs. Rex asked, "Are you sore at me for what happened back at the farm? For not telling you the truth?" "No. We're in too much trouble to waste time being angry. What's done is done. Only the future is important now." Rex could have made his self-recrimination vocal, but he felt that that too would be a waste of time. He said, "Didn't any of you Terrans know about the opening in that hutch?" "I'm sure no one did, except perhaps Tommy." She thought that over and added, "No, that's absurd. If Tommy had known it, he wouldn't have been able to keep it to himself." "Maybe they'll hunt around and find it." "Maybe, but I hope they don't." "Why not?" "If they find the opening, they'll come looking for us. These Martians are hostile. Some of our men might be killed, and they have wives and families." Jean made Rex feel ashamed of himself. "Don't worry. I'll get you out of here." She glanced up at him. Her chin trembled slightly as she sought to stiffen it. At that moment they walked into a larger tunnel. There were more overhead bulbs here and a ribbon of narrow-gauge track stretching off into the distance. "A railroad!" Rex exclaimed. "I wonder where it goes." "I've got a hunch we're going to find out." One of the Martians had gone around a shoulder of the tunnel. There was a whining sound. He returned in the driver's seat of a small rail car. Barzoo motioned the Terrans into one of the seats. The other Martians got in behind them. The driver pulled a throttle. The whining sound increased and the car moved off down the tracks. Rex listened for a time, inspected the portion of the car within range of his eyes, then said, "I wonder what kind of power this thing uses." Jean did not answer. Her head had dropped to his shoulder. She was asleep. He settled himself, forming a pocket with his body so she could rest against him with the seat supporting her. Behind him the eyes of the three Martians, including Barzoo, had also closed. Rex wondered if the driver was asleep also. The car rolled on in a monotonously straight line, mile after mile. Rex realized he had discovered a civilization under Mars, the existence of which was unknown on Terra. He knew that none of the authorities or experts suspected anything so civilized as a railroad in the forbidden polar lands. At best they thought the territory inhabited by hardy bands of hostile, backward ice dwellers. This was indeed a great discovery, he told himself bitterly. Of course neither he nor Jean would live to reveal it, but they could die happy, knowing they were great explorers. He grew tired of excoriating himself. The passing overhead lights had a hypnotic effect. He closed his eyes and slept. End of Part 1.